What's up, guys? Today we will be checking out the best budget Samsung smartphones for $200 and under. So let's go ahead and get started with the Samsung Galaxy S10e. We talked about this phone a lot on the channel. I still think it's one of the best phones that you can pick up for 200 bucks, and it's actually just slightly below it now. I think it's around like 190, and I'll have that link down below. Basically, it's still a flagship device with a ton of features to offer here. We do have an full premium design, aluminum frame, glass back. It's also IP68 dust and water resistant. You do have a beautiful 5.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display that's HDR10 at 1080p. 438 for the PPI with the punch hole, completely flat display. It's very colorful, gets pretty bright, and overall just a really good panel here. We do have on here Android 11, and it is scheduled to get Android 12 as well, which is really nice. You do have the Exynos version and then the Snapdragon version. I highly recommend the Snapdragon version. It is the 855 with the Adreno 640. So overall, it's still a beast. I do have a full gaming test for you guys to check out if you want to see that in more detail. But just know you will be able to play games pretty much maxed out still on this chip. You do have micro SD support and 128 gigs of internal storage along with 6 gigs of RAM. You also have a headphone jack on board with some pretty nice sounding and loud stereo speakers, so I was really happy with that. And also this phone has all of the little bells and whistles as far as NFC, physical fingerprint scanner on the side, which works really well. Samsung desktop support is actually on here as well, which is a really nice feature to have. And then you also have on here a pretty good camera system, a 12 megapixel standard and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. You also get 4K video at 60 FPS along with a 10 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K. So basically you're still getting, an excellent camera system, honestly. The only sort of thing about this phone is that you do have a 3100 milliamp battery, so battery life on here is just kind of okay. You average around maybe 4 hours of screen on time. If you're a light user, maybe 4 hours and 30 minutes. You do have 15-watt charging with wireless charging as well as reverse wireless charging. So if you do want to charge like a pair of earbuds or another phone, you can do that. So the S10e is still an excellent device for you to consider. Next is the Samsung Galaxy A12. You can actually find this for around 160 bucks, and this is a pretty okay phone. You can find these in like Boost Mobile, Metro, Walmart. You can see it in mostly prepaid stores. But like I said, I do have those links down below. And this is just a plastic phone, which I actually was a big fan of the design on here. I thought it was a really nice looking phone. It had a matte finish too, so I didn't pick up fingerprints really easy. This one has a PLS IPS display at 6.5 inches, 720p plus, 270 for the PPI, water drop notch. Overall, it's a pretty decent panel. Again, for the price, 150 bucks. I'm not really complaining. You also have on here Android 11 with One UI 3.1. This one has the Helio P35 processor and Power VR graphics. Basically, what that means is just really for casual use. This is not a gaming phone or anything like that. It's really just for casual web browsing. You might play Subway Surf every now and then. It's really just for basic stuff, social media. You also have micro SD support with 32 gigs of internal storage, 2 or 3 gigs of RAM, depending on your configuration. And they do have other configurations like 64 gigs and 4 gigs. So just make sure you pay attention to, the configuration. You do have on here a headphone jack is on here. The single firing speaker was decently loud. You also have NFC on this guy too, which is really nice. And the fingerprint scanner is actually side mounted, which is definitely a plus with this device. The cameras on this device were actually better than I thought they were going to be. So you do have a 48 megapixel standard, a 5 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth. You also have 1080p video and an 8 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080p as well. So overall, as you can see from the images, I thought it did a pretty good job with color, a good job with detail. You have a really cool macro camera to play with. So overall, just for a cheap smartphone, if you're in good lighting, you can definitely get a pretty decent shot out of this phone. So you do have on here a 5000 milliamp battery with 15-watt charging, and that's definitely the plus. This phone really lasts all day, if not 2 days. So the battery is just massive on here. So if you're somebody that is looking for a cheap phone with great battery life, this is definitely a phone I would consider. Next is the Samsung Galaxy A21s for around 200 bucks even. Again, another plastic body phone on here. You do have a PLS IPS display at 6.5 inches. It is a 720p plus display, 270 for the PPI. This one is upgradable to Android 11. This one has the Exynos 850 and the Mali G52 GPU. So basically, again, just a sort of phone for basic use, web browsing, social media, casual gaming. I had no problem, honestly, with just performance on here if you're just taking it light. You do have micro SD support, 32 gigs of internal storage, 2 or 3 gigs of RAM, depending on configuration. You do have on here a headphone jack with a single firing speaker, which sounds pretty decent. You also have on here NFC as well, which is really nice, and the fingerprint scanner is on the back and it works fine, so I had zero issues with that. And you do have the option for face unlock on majority of these Samsung devices. So you do have on here pretty decent cameras on here, a quad camera setup, a 48 megapixel standard, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and then a 2 megapixel macro and depth sensor at 1080p, and then a 13 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080p. Basically, again, you get pretty decent shots with this phone. Again, it's the classic. If you take it into low light, it's not going to perform well. In good lighting, you are going to get a pretty decent shot. And again, for 200 bucks, I think most people will be fine with the image quality that this phone puts out. So you do have on here, which is probably the best thing about this phone, is the massive 5,000 milliamp battery on here. This is another phone that really lasts all day, so I was really happy with battery life on here. And again, if you're a light user, easily 2 days of battery life with this phone, so I was really happy with that. Next is the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. Now you can find this right now on Amazon for around 190 bucks. This is still an excellent device, one of my favorite refurbished products I picked up this year. You still have a full premium design on here. It feels super solid in the hand. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It actually has a Super AMOLED HDR10 display at 6.2 inches with a 1440p resolution at 529 for the PPI. So one of the highest res displays on this list, and it does not have any type of notch or punch hole. So for people who hate the notch, punch hole, there is none on this. This is upgradable to, I believe, Android 10, and then you have ROMs that you can flash on here if you want Android 11. There's a big ROM community for Samsung. You do have the Exynos 9810 or the Snapdragon 845. I highly recommend the Snapdragon version and Adreno 630 GPU. That's going to be the best for performance and battery life. And this phone actually still does a really great job with gaming. Check out my gaming test I did on this phone. You're able to play most games at high settings, which is really awesome. So I was really happy that this phone was able to still keep up. So you do have micro SD support, 64 gigs of internal storage, and 6 gigs of RAM on here. So you also have on this phone stereo speakers, which sound really good, and you also have a headphone jack on here as well, which is nice, and NFC is on board. In addition to that, you do have Samsung desktop support, as well as a sort of like a kind of a nifty thing with the Samsung Iris scanner that kind of scans your eye, which is kind of cool. You do have on here a very good camera. So you do have a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel telephoto, and then you have a 4K video, 30 or 60 FPS, along with an 8 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1440p. Overall, the images were actually very good, so I was really surprised with how actually color accurate the cameras were, and then how much detail you were getting. So I really like the images on here. The selfie cam was really good too, so I had zero complaints with the S9 Plus. I think it goes above and beyond really for this 190 bucks. So you do have a 3,500 milliamp battery with 15 watt charging, along with wireless charging as well. Battery life is just kind of okay on this phone. It's not anything too special. Usually average around like maybe 5 hours of screen on time, which is pretty decent. So overall, the S9 Plus is just an awesome device to consider. Last is the cheapest phone on this list. You can actually pick the Galaxy A11 up for around 100 bucks. So if you're just looking for a cheap sort of like reliable phone for 100 bucks. This is also a very good option if you're a Samsung fan. It does have the plastic build, nothing too special. A pretty big 6.4-inch PLS IPS display at 720p plus 268 for the PPI. Again, it also has the punch hole as well, which is really nice. So it is also upgradable to Android 11, which is cool. This actually runs the Snapdragon 450 and Adreno 506. Which again, I prefer these Snapdragon chips over Samsung's Exynos ones, but performance wise, again, it's the same story, just decent performance. You're not going to be doing anything crazy on this guy as far as just web browsing, social media, light gaming. It's not anything too powerful. You do have micro SD support, 32 gigs of storage and 2 gigs of RAM, or 3 gigs of RAM depending on your configuration. You also have a headphone jack with a single firing speaker, which sounded fairly decent. This phone does not have NFC as well, so do remember that. And you also have physical fingerprint scanner on the back, which works fine, as well as face unlock. The cameras on here again are just decent. 13 megapixel standard, a 5 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel depth. It only shoots in 1080p with an 8 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p. And overall, as you can see from the images, again, nothing too crazy. Like I said, for 100 bucks, you get decent images with this guy. Battery life, I was actually really happy with. It's a 4,000 milliamp battery with 15 watt charging. Overall, this is definitely an all-day phone, so you're not gonna be struggling with battery life with this phone for sure. So that is pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.